Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and in bookstores across the country. We'll even help you promote your book. That's right, we do all this for you. Biography, self-help, mystery, novels, sci-fi, even a children's book. No matter what genre, Page Publishing can bring your book to life. Call today for your free author submission kit and find out how you can be the next published author at Page Publishing.
Call for your free author submission kit at 855-993-2114. That's 855-993-2114.
Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and we're back here in Irvine, California, and we're broadcasting from the great wine country of Northern California. Drew, welcome back to Schaftlein Report, and as usual, the Biden administration gives us lots of material to talk about every time you come on the show. Welcome back.
Good to be with you. That's correct. It's America last all the time. Americans last as well.
Drew, this illegal immigration situation has literally gone out of control. Now, there's a lot of theorists, some conspiracy theories, some not, that believe this was a great Democratic plan, infiltrate the country with millions of illegal immigrants. They'll eventually become citizens of the country. They'll vote Democrat, and we will have permanent Democratic rule in this country forever. But you know what, Drew? Something's gone astray here. I mean, there's 16 million of them in the country now, and there's no sign it's going to stop. That they've been successful at. But now these deep blue cities, Denver, Los Angeles, New York, I could go on, are literally bursting at the seam with illegal immigrants. Some cities like New York are giving you EBT cards, cell phones, 3 square meals a day, some in luxury hotels. Others in Denver are literally, they ran out of room and they're out on the streets. Drew, what do you make of this situation right now? And has this Democratic long-term plan actually backfired on them?
Well, it's kind of like a seesaw. Yes, inevitably, this type of behavior, policy is always going to backfire, was always going to backfire in the Democrat Party, in the sense that these policies, like everything else that they create and push forward, they're harmful to the American citizen. So they're damaging our way of life, our future, our circumstances. And it's very obvious in these blue states like New York, like you pointed out, where these Democrat voters are seeing and experiencing actually what the rancid fruit yields of the Democrat Party. But of course, with this scheming, you know, if Democrats don't wake up and push back fast enough, in another way, they have these guardrails put up with these policies. For example, trying to grant illegal aliens the ability to vote with mail-in ballots and so on and so forth, that they actually don't need the Democrat voter anymore. So it's kind of a fight right now because, yes, on the one hand, this is a winning issue for the country and Americans and Trump and the Republican Party. But if we squander it, we get to a point where there's kind of the point of no return, because how do we overcome the system they've kind of rigged with this game?
You know, I always had the belief that you had to be an American citizen to be counted for House of Representatives, Electoral College, etc. But it's not true. I mean, the Biden administration, when they came into office, they signed an executive order, apparently that all people have to be counted, even the illegal immigrants that are in this country. And with 16 million of them in the country right now, and the average congressional district, I think it's 762,000 people, that effectively is 22 congressional districts if they were all cluttered in one piece. Now, that's not the case. They're spread out throughout the country. But Drew, having illegal immigrants receive representation in the United States House of Representatives, something just smacks me as just that's just flat out wrong. And, you know, can Congress fix it? Probably not with a Democratic Senate right now. You know, heck, we have enough trouble passing anything in Congress these days. But Drew, this is a very bad situation that illegal immigration has fostered a situation where illegal immigrants are counted towards the votes. And again, we'll talk about it later in the show, 270 needed to win. This could be a huge problem in this upcoming election.
Well, look, this is totally repugnant. I would explain it to people with a historical context. If we go back to the Civil War and we look at some of the issues that led to that, obviously slavery being one of them, people are often confused, actually, because they're mistaught by the Democrats what the 3/5 compromise was. Remember, the Southern slave states were trying to expand their power in Congress by counting their black slaves towards representation. And so the Northern states said, no, 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 we don't want to count them as full people because that's going to give you, the Southern slave states, more power in Congress. And of course, it's been bastardized by the left, which says, oh, we didn't want to count blacks as people. No, we were trying to limit the power of the Southern slave states. And so what you're seeing now is a similar jockeying for power. So they want to bring in these illegal immigrants. And think about how brilliant this is and disgusting. What have you had in these blue states, right? You have Democrat policies that do what in California, for example? They cause a great flight from the state. And so you have blue states actually losing representation and losing power in Congress, which helps the Republicans out. And so what are they doing? They're importing illegal immigrants to replace those sane Americans who are fleeing the bad policies and destruction of blue states. And those people are simply being replaced and then some by illegals who they're now using to not only maintain their representation and political power in Washington, D.C., but to expand it. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, and it's really bad, too, because every time Joe Biden gets asked about it, he says, well, I need legislation to fix the problem. And people on our side are literally pulling out their hair saying, no, you don't. Look at what the state of Texas did. The state of Texas put barbed wire down there at that park where there was literally hundreds of thousands of people crossing. All of a sudden, it slows to a trickle. You know, Congress has a press conference down there at the border. All of a sudden, it slows to a trickle. I mean, what's happening here is it's like whack-a-mole situation where, okay, they move now from coming through Texas. Now there's more infiltration in Arizona and in Southern California, and you're going to see the same thing happen. But this replacement theory that you're talking about, it's spot on because, look, New York, they lost a congressional seat. Who picked it up? Florida. Who's the more prosperous conservative state? Florida. And I think what's actually happening, Drew, as people are leaving some of the blue states and coming to the red states, sometimes they bring their political views, but more time than not, it's not as bad. So what you have happening is a situation where the blue states become bluer because the illegals are coming into the blue states. The red states become redder. And, you know, we're going to talk about this, but now we end up having an election basically where 7 or 8 states, which has happened for the last, 3 election cycles, are going to select our president. So, folks, this is not a pretty situation. And the other thing that's happening, Drew, on the illegal immigration piece, even the Wall Street Journal came out and was talking about this. yes, the illegal, I mean, you can't put 16 million people in a country, give them cell phones, place to eat, place to sleep, transportation, everything that goes into an economy without having some amount of growth attributed to that. But on the same side, and Democrats like that because they like to point out, and we're going to talk about the fallacies in that later in the show, but they like to point out, well, the economy's growing at this, and we have unemployment rate down here at 3.7%. We're going to get into why those numbers aren't necessarily what they are. But the flip side of that is American wages. You throw 16 million people in, and a lot of employers are going to say, wait a minute, I can hire this person for less. And, frankly, in many cases, a lot less. Then how is that affecting your lower to middle income Americans? It's put fear on the table on top of inflation. Elaborate. Am I going down the right path here, Drew, or is this just a Republican conspiracy theory?
Look, I believe still that the illegal immigration situation is actually the most serious threat and the most damaging thing this administration has done to us. Because look, economic policy, things like that it's not easy. We can crawl back from that, climb back from that with sane policies that Trump could put in place. But when you're talking about 16 plus illegal immigrants in this country under this administration, you've got it's a lot of work to frankly remove them from the country. Now, policy can do that. You can take away all their welfare and everything else and make it so that there's nowhere for them to work, so they deport themselves. But I want you to understand how deep this goes. I mean, you're seeing these illegals testing, obviously, the social networks and put in place in places like New York, right? The welfare, social services, and so on and so forth. Look, this is you can go back, and it's Cloward Piven are the people that designed it. People can look into them. It's very interesting and frightening. But the goal of illegal immigration, according to Cloward Piven, was to put so many people and poor Americans on welfare that it collapses the economic system. Because the ultimate goal of their model was to force everyone on basically a government paid salary, so we all just sit here at home and the government gives us a check. Now, they never think about how you pay for that and so on and so forth. But what's going to happen if you flood these social services in New York, right? One, it's going to collapse the welfare programs in place for Americans. But also, what's it going to do? They're not going to have money to pay for many of these things, and it's going to make these state governments dependent upon the federal government as well. And so you're also attacking the sovereignty of states, because if you're going to force these people on these social services that are in place in states, they're going to have to go to the federal government for money. So it's a disgusting scheme in which you're left with one option that they're going to present you with, which is basically a one-party rule, and you're going to be beholden to the federal government and the Democrat Party because you're going to need the cash.
Well, I think a lot of Americans are actually seeing through, Drew, and they're experiencing what we're talking about here, because this has emerged along with inflation as the top two issues in this campaign. And, we saw results in that New York special election. The guy that won, he didn't run on a Biden ticket. I mean, he ran that Biden's too old for the job. Illegal immigration's a problem. And, with both sides, he ran like a centrist Democrat, that elusive centrist that really doesn't exist, because effectively what happens, you and I know this, they can be the most right-wing Democrat in the world. But one thing that party does when it comes to getting their members to vote, there is no disagreement. I mean, the most conservative Democrat votes the same way as the most liberal Democrat on every single vote that takes place. So give Hakeem Jeffries some credit. He has learned the Nancy Pelosi way of getting his members to line up. And, unfortunately, on our side of the ledger, it doesn't actually work that way. All right, but let me move on a little bit, because this has been a big issue. And you know what? When you tie it in, Drew, no wonder the left is so furious at Trump. Under Trump, the immigration policies worked. Illegal immigration really slowed down. And effectively, compared to what we have now, you had a secure border. And the wall never got built. It got partially built. And what did Biden do? He literally, first week on the job, dismantled every Trump policies. And now we're sitting here with this big issue today. But let me move off immigration for a little bit here. And let's talk about Trump's legal issues, lawfare, as they like to call it now. Well, a trial date got set for the, quote, hush money case in New York, okay, March the 25th. the Fani Willis, the Fani Willis case. When you got to refer to a case by the prosecutor, I mean, something's wrong in that case. I mean, but it's turned into the Fani Willis case in Georgia. That thing looks like it's going to turn itself, and she's likely going to get fired from that case. Who in the hell ever heard of a prosecutor in a high-profile case admitting to an affair with one of her investigators? I mean, this, and of course, Trump's right at the center of it. And then the appeals court case where they literally gave him like 4 days to appeal to the Supreme Court, which normally it takes 30 to 60. Drew, this is, even to an uneducated viewer, it's obvious what's happening. The Democratic Party continues to try to use lawfare to get Trump out of this election because they're not dumbasses. They see the polls. And when Biden won the election 3 years ago, assuming that, we'll accept that, Biden was leading in the polls at this time by 4 to 5 points. And he eventually was elected. Right now, Trump is up anywhere from 2 to 5 points. That's a 10-point swing. Drew, am I tying it all together with a nice little bow here? The Democrats really fear this guy, and they're going to do everything they can to not have him be the nominee, despite overwhelming support.
Look, Democrats know that they couldn't have won in 2020 without voter fraud. In fact, there's this amazing report out that was done by, it was a group one done by, I've got it in front of me because I wanted to tell you about it because it's amazing. I'll look at it in a minute, I guess. But anyway, basically, they determined that more than 25% of the votes cast in 2020 were done so could be considered voter fraud. Now, they run all these scenarios bringing down. Now, they're certain that it's more than 25%, but they were generous and they said, okay, we ran scenarios where voter fraud was only 3%. And even at 3% of ballots cast that would have been voter fraud, they determined that Trump would have actually won the election. So 3% of voter fraud actually cast it for Joe Biden instead of Trump. And so Trump would have actually won Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and he did lose Michigan and Nevada. So he still would have won actually in 2020. I just think that's important to point out because people keep thinking that Trump can't win or he's not popular. And the reality is 2020 was used almost as like mental warfare to convince us to abandon a candidate that was actually really, really popular then and can still win today. So I just think that's so imperative that people understand. Now, look, and you're right. So I think he would win by even more now if you look at the differences based on polling. But, this thing with Fani Willis is huge because what she just got caught in today was a lie. So obviously it was important for her to claim that her hiring of her boy toy, Wade or whatever his name was, that it happened after she'd already taken the case and after she'd already hired him. Well, one of her friends, confidants, and former ex-employees said that actually the affair began, I think it was in 2019, October of 2019. So well before this case happened. And Fani Willis, so corrupt. So what she was doing was she hired him, was paying him with tax dollars, and then he was using those tax dollars, right, to pay for their elaborate fancy vacations. So these are the people that are going after Trump.
Folks, we're going to take a 60-second break. We're going to be back, and we're going to talk about the electoral implications of everything we just discussed. Be back in 60.
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company. Like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like
rather than my skills. I want to be judged
by my political beliefs.
I want to get promoted based on my chromosomes. When I grow up, I want to be offended
by my coworkers
and walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see,
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety and do workplace sensitivity training all day long. When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder
just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist. I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
And we're back, folks. Drew, I want to get into a couple things about the election right now. You know, we were talking about 270 electoral votes to win, okay? We're talking about how Trump is up in the polls 2 to 5 points. We're talking about Joe Biden. 86% of Americans feel Joe Biden is too old for office. And an astounding 70% of Democrats feel that way. I know there's all this talk out there. Wow, they are going to get rid of Biden. It's going to be Michelle. It's going to be those and I'm glad to see you're shaking your head. Those pipe dreams are not going to happen. Sorry to burst your bubble out there, everybody who's trying to buy into this conspiracy stuff. But the only guy in the Democratic Party that can decide Joe Biden's not going to run is Joe Biden. And Drew, when you think about his perspective, he came to the United States Senate at the age of 29. He's never lost an election. He feels Trump is the worst thing that's ever happened to this country. And he feels, and he said this in that deranged press conference last week, that his policies are working. So in my view, I don't think Joe Biden's going to step aside. And there's no way this fantasy about there's going to be a Democrat replace him. Again, the only one that can make that call is Joe Biden. Cook Political Report comes out today, Charlie Cook, supposedly a nonpartisan report, says Biden has a massive uphill climb to get to 270. And you and I were just looking at the voting data. I mean, Trump's polling ahead in 7, maybe 8 of the swing states. Some it's tighter than others. And I always have my doubts about Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. But Drew, how do you see it right now? I mean, does he have to really carry and win the popular vote to win this election, given all the shenanigans that could happen?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't need to. I think it's exceedingly hard for Republicans to win popular votes now because of the way Democrats have changed their election laws in their own states. So they can get as many. This is why they want to change the Electoral College and abolish it, by the way, because they can manufacture ballots and have mail-in ballots and no voter ID needed, just like they did in 2020. And so California could win every single election, or New York or Philadelphia could win every election for Democrats in perpetuity. So that's why they want to do that. So look, he should win the popular vote, and he should win, the Electoral College based on what this administration has done. I want to point something out because you brought it up, and you're actually in the minority, Mark. I'm sure you know this. I am too, but I just did an entire episode of my show on the fact that Democrats don't have a plan B. Their plan A, B, and C is Joe Biden. So all of this talk about replacing him with Michelle Obama or they're going after him now because none of that's happening. They're circling the wagons and protecting him. And sure, there are people who would like to see him eliminated that have ambitions of their own, but that is not the plan. Rational people would think that they would get rid of Joe Biden at this point because of the corruption and everything else. But I would suggest that all of that corruption and what's going on with Joe Biden, he's been the most effective destroyer of America in our nation's history. And so I do believe it's true that Obama and his minions and everyone around him, others as well in the shadows, are actually running this administration. And if you think about having a puppet, there's no better puppet than Biden. And I would even say, as much as we talk about how he's compromised in terms of his dealings and money taken and bribery and so on and so forth with China and other enemy nations out there, it actually makes him more beholden to the deep state himself because he needs their protection. He needs the DOJ's protection. He needs them to keep covering this up. So actually, I think that those things that he did while he was in the Obama administration that were criminal activities actually make him the perfect puppet for Obama and whoever else is behind there because he'll do anything they want.
Yeah, I concur with you on that. And again, I think maybe you and I are in the minority and on the conservative side of the ledger feeling that. But when you just simply look at the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy, I mean, I just don't see anyone other than Joe Biden step in. What are they going to do? Replace him with Kamala Harris? Her numbers are lower than his. And any of these other pipe dreams that people float names, again, unless Joe Biden says, I'm not going to do it anymore, it ain't going to happen. I'm going to hit one other thing on the election, and I want to talk about what's going on in Israel. When the Democrat won that special election in New York the other day, $14 million spent on a race that, they should have won by a lot more, frankly. the Republicans recruited someone that used to be in the Israeli Defense Forces, apparently somewhat resume exaggeration there. But anyhow, they got outspent $14 million to $8 million. $8 million is still a lot of money to throw at a congressional district they got to rerun it in a few months anyhow. But Drew, politics aside, let's shift now to Israel. I never in my wildest dreams did I think I would see a U.S. president trying to strong arm an Israeli prime minister in the middle of a war that he's actually winning and try to get him to halt the progress. I mean, there's stories out there about how Israel is causing ceasefires not to happen when the demands of Hamas are absolutely off the charts. Drew, have you ever seen anything like this? I mean, Obama made gestures about it, but Biden's actually stepping up and saying on camera, no, it's too much. It's over the top. What do you make of what?
Well, if you think about it, it's brilliant because Biden ends up being the scapegoat. And whether it's Obama and his people who would have had dreams of doing this kind of thing, they didn't want to face the public pressure that came with it. So their images aren't tarnished by what Biden's doing right now. But no, this is insipid. It's actually absolutely evil what he's doing. And I mean, this basically in many ways has just left the news cycle, in my opinion, Mark. I don't see much about it. I have a few questions. How many, for example, hostages does Hamas still have? How many have they killed? What are we doing about that? We know what Israel's doing. They're going in and using their elite forces to try and free these hostages still. I don't see what support we're offering at this point for that. But I mean, this basically just has left the news in many ways. I mean, Hamas, I would remind people, paraglided into a music festival and slaughtered, and then, of course, took hostages, over 1,000 people, Israelis, some Americans. And we want to take the side of Hamas and say we need to give in to their demands. Give us all the hostages back, and we won't kill all of you. That's what we should say. You can give us every hostage right now, and we might let a few of you live. That's what we should be saying.
Yeah, and it's the other thing happening over there right now. The Israelis and Hezbollah on the northern border, where citizens still haven't been able to go back. You know, there's an uneasy truce there. Yeah, they're lobbing rockets back and forth, but neither Hezbollah nor Israel wants to have a second front in this war. We got about a minute left, minute and a half left, Drew. Official Washington was freaking out last night and this morning over this report of the Russians having nuclear weapons in space. I mean, supposedly it was leaked, congressional testimony. In less than a minute left, Drew, what do you make of this situation? Is this just something more to cast fear or strength? I mean, increase the military budget? I mean, Russians' nuclear weapons, they're not there yet, but the policymakers are making it sound like they are.
Listen to me. This is garbage. This is wagging the dog. This is lying. This is tactics from Washington, D.C. Two things are going on. The first thing is we have Spygate exploding. We learned that Obama actually used foreign nations that were friends of ours, the British intelligence agency, for example, to actually go in and illegally spy on the Trump campaign. So Obama was in on this. The Clintons were in on this. It blows open their criminal behavior, and basically the coup attempt. So that's the first thing. So this eliminates that from the news cycle. The secondary thing is the House, they're trying to put pressure on Mike Johnson to pass this horrific Ukrainian spending bill to give them $96 billion in addition. This is not popular with the American people anymore. So they want to create a situation in which Russia looks big and scary. They're actually a real threat to America, which no one has bought, as people have turned away from this war and don't want to offer any more monetary support anymore because Ukraine has lost. And we've, of course, learned other things, too. So that's what's going on here. Don't buy this. This is garbage from Washington, D.C. And Mike Turner's behind this, and he's a Republican from Ohio who wants to send our children over to fight in a war in Ukraine.
Drew, we're out of time as always. You know what? You make so much sense every time you add the analysis. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Folks, again, we ran out of time today. We had more stuff we could talk about, but we'll be back on Tuesday. We're going to dissect what's really going on with this economy, and we look forward to talking to you then. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday.